So product-focused marketing is what happens if you think of a market as between a seller and a buyer, and you think on one extreme there's a seller's market and the other extreme there's a buyer's market. In a seller's market, if you want the product, you have to go to them. So that gives them a lot of power in that exchange. And under those circumstances, people tend to do what's called product-focused marketing. And what that basically is, since you're going to come to me if I want the product, I work on developing a good product, I work on reducing costs, and I'm very much concerned with selling my product. When Nike FuelBand first came out, and this is a Nike FuelBand, I had one of the early ones, and this is one of the first generation ones. Since there was not much else in the marketplace, then they could really focus on the unique features. I didn't really consider anything else. I bought a Nike FuelBand because I wanted something that monitored my calories, my steps, my energy, etc., and there really wasn't very much choice. So that's product-focused marketing. What happens is, again, we're thinking about the exchange between the buyers and sellers. As more competition comes in, as there are other substitutes, then buyers have more choice. And in that case, when the marketer wants you to buy from them rather than from the competition, they have to start focusing on what you want. And so then it becomes a customer-focused market. Well, this is the second generation. I don't have it yet, but the second generation of the Nike FuelBand really focused on the way the customers were using the product, less on the way Nike thought it should be used. So actually, one of the things that's different, first of all, there's color in it. So they come out with different colors. Well, Volt is the new yellow color, so it's kind of sexy color. The other thing I think is really interesting is a lot of people were using this FuelBand. You don't want to have that many things lining up on your wrist. And so one of the things the FuelBand did, almost as an afterthought, was to tell the time. Well, it turns out because people didn't want to have so many things lining up on their wrist, they were using the FuelBand as time. But in order to get the time in the original version, you got to I passed my goal. You got to cycle through all the different things. Look how long it's taking me, and now I can tell you the time. The new version, you just double-click it, and the time comes out right away. That's more customer-focused. It's giving the customers what they want and giving them a reason to buy this over the competition. So if you're looking through these trends of marketing, product focus, when there isn't a lot of competition, market gets more competitive, and then you start being customer focused. What's happened in the last, say, 10 years is we've got a connected community now, and there's social media, there's the internet, well, what's interesting about this product is every day you can upload your data to the internet, and you can keep track of it that way because it doesn't hold that much data on each thing, so you can keep a long record. I've had my record now for about 6 months, what I've done. In addition, I can interact with my friends who also have Nike FuelBand, or I can interact with them on Facebook, and we can share data, and I can tell my friend when she's being really lazy, move it, you're too slow, and she can tell me when I'm doing well. So we have this whole connected community, and I think over time, the power for Nike behind the FuelBand is going to be the data. And once they can get that connected to your Facebook activity, connected to other things that they can tell about it, they can start really marketing different kinds of products to you and increase customer share and share of wallet. Well, once you know how I use the product, you might be able to market shoes to me on that, market certain kinds of clothing. If you can upload my data with my Facebook data, you'll know well, I'm using this in New York, or I'm using it in San Francisco, or something like that. Or you can see who my friends are and can connect my friend, then you can market to my friends and things like that. So once you have that data, if you figure, I now have your internet data, I have your offline data, they know how many calories I'm burning, they know when I'm doing these kinds of things. You link all those data together, and you have a really pretty big picture of your consumer. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity to try to add customer value by understanding exactly what you want and where you are.
These activity trackers or electronic fitness bands or whatever we want to call them are actually a great example or a great opportunity for customer centricity in action. Part of it is the data, which we can talk about separately, but part of it is it gives a company a chance to really surround its valuable customers with a variety of product, services, and information, and to use that information to figure out which kinds of products and services to deliver up to the right kinds of customer. So it recognizes that customers are all different from each other. It recognizes that what they're doing, how they're moving around can interplay with what other behaviors they have, what they eat, what kinds of exercises they do, where they live, what their lifestyle is. So it gives the company a chance to really better understand a customer, not necessarily the specific details of their heart rate and so on, but just a better picture that they couldn't get any other way. It's hard to say how much of this data is actually being stored and used by the companies, but because the data is going someplace where it can be seen not only by the user but by other people. So, for instance, in the case of the Nike FuelBand, that it becomes social fun that I could see my friends' activities and compare to mine. So the data is definitely being stored somewhere, but of course the user has a lot of control over it. One of the other great opportunities with these electronic gadgets is that it lets companies that, beyond those that are already in this space, it gives them an entree point to deal with customers in a new and different way. So for instance, I can see a big pharmaceutical firm giving these bands out, giving them to people, giving them a service as a way to understand what they're doing, and not necessarily to try to push pills on them, but all the pharma firms are talking about customer centricity. They recognize that they need to understand their customers more than just developing new drugs and hoping that people are going to buy them. So it does create new kinds of business opportunities, and I can see lots of different kinds of firms besides pharma getting into this space as well. All the data that's being collected by these electronic fitness bands, it's a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it adds to the whole idea of big data. It gives us all kinds of columns in a database, all kinds of observations that we didn't have before. In fact, we couldn't have even dreamed of a few years ago. So on one hand, all of the challenges and opportunities associated with big data are associated with these new kinds of data structures. But there are opportunities there as well. And if we can triangulate someone's purchasing habits with their media consumption, with their exercise activities, with their sleep habits, and so on, we can get a more complete picture about who does what. I'm not saying that this kind of information will transform our understanding of customer behavior. I'm not saying that it will contribute significantly to our estimates of customer lifetime value, but it can't hurt. And it's so new and it's so different, it's hard to say just how much incremental contribution it will have. So it'll be great to see that. We understand what kinds of statistical methods we'd want to use, but the results, the impact of these new data sources is something that the future generations will tell us. We're just barely getting started with these new electronic fitness bands. I think there's a lot of people today who are messing around with them. They're trying them out, sometimes unsuccessfully. It's not clear what they're doing with the data or how they're sharing it, what companies are doing with the data. But I see this as more of a generational kind of issue. I imagine that the next generation will start putting these fitness bands on our children when they're not even a year old. It'll just be something that we want to monitor all the time, obviously for different reasons when they're infants or toddlers than when they're adults. But people are going to be used to wearing these things. They're going to be used to using the data. The whole idea of the quantified self, a concept that a lot of people are talking about today, it tends to apply more to grown-ups. Can I look at myself and my exercise and my nutrition and other kinds of habits? But when the quantified self works its way down to 1- and 2-year-olds, and when they're accustomed to doing it, and when they start tying in their exercise activities with their social media usage and their schoolwork and so on, we're going to get just a much more complete picture about individuals. Now, on one hand, that can be a bit creepy. It can be a bit intrusive. It might be a bit too much. A lot of that data might be useless. But it's going to be a new era. And the idea of people managing their own data, figuring out what the value of that data is to themselves, and maybe economically, a lot of folks are talking about that. A lot of companies are developing new business models around that idea. But I think that these gadgets, these armbands that people are wearing, is going to be the major breakthrough to let people understand the value of their data. And I think these business models will take off as a result of these gadgets moving their way down to children.
Well, I think the really interesting thing about the Nike FuelBand is it potentially appeals to a very, very wide range of users, everybody from kind of the serious athlete who's interested in really monitoring what's going on with their body to the so-called weekend warrior, maybe people like you and I, Steve, who like to play a bit of tennis, a bit of basketball, this and that here and there. So it's potentially a very, very wide group. I think it also cuts across all of the traditional segmentation variables like gender, it's both for men and for women, cuts across various age groups, various socioeconomic brackets. So this is a product, I think, if marketed effectively, potentially has a very, very wide target group and a number of segments within that. So as we've been discussing, Steve, in our other sessions, pricing is a very, very difficult thing to get right because the price has to be something, obviously, that makes sufficient margin for the firm. The price also has to be fair and relevant relative to the competition and whatever those other points of comparison and products are. And it also has to be something that the customer feels comfortable with. So I think $149 is a price that's sufficiently high that I don't just feel that like this is a cheap piece of plastic around my wrist. It's something that really has technology embedded in it that's a good product and an interesting product. It's not so high that it's going to be completely inaccessible, but the point of comparison is very, very interesting. Is this like a $50 monitor that would monitor my heart? Clearly it does a little bit more than that, so I don't want that point of comparison. Is it a new sort of piece of technology like an iPod or an iPad or an iPhone, something that we're all used to sort of carrying around? Well, it's kind of related to those because it has a USB connection where I get the data feed. So I think it's really interesting from a pricing point of view of how you use all of those things that we discussed to communicate this value. Of course, it ends in a 9, so it's sort of cheaper than $150 in some sense, but it doesn't overly cheapen the product. So those are all the various elements that presumably Nike thought about when they set the price. You know, here's the cost, here's the willingness to pay, what's the right comparison in terms of the competition, and then also the other things that affect fairness in the channel. And so, of course, you want to take into account what the various competitors are doing and what the early products like the Fitbit and so on in this category were, and also what might be coming next. So how could one then, as has been done with other products in this general class, add to the product line through different colors, different technologies, maybe different levels of service in terms of data feed. So this is also a product where we might start to see that kind of differentiation coming through too. So I think this is a really interesting question. So again, when we discussed in the earlier course era segment about the way one communicates and the way one designs a message and the 7 M's of marketing communication, one of the key issues around the message is, should the message have a rational appeal or should it have an emotional appeal? And of course it depends on the kind of product. Now emotion's important here because Nike has this notion, you know, that anyone who has a body really is an athlete. We're all athletes in some sense, and so we should be doing the best that we can with our bodies, all the way from, we think of the early campaigns of Nike, you know, just do it, be like Mike. It's very, very aspirational. It kind of gets you to think about the power of getting in better shape, the way you're going to feel, the way others are going to perceive you. So it's much, much more important, I think, to have that kind of messaging to really resonate with the customers than a messaging that's, you know, count the number of steps that you're doing, this is the technology, this is how we feed it. So I think this is a classic case of a product where the product itself is based on really interesting technology, but the way that you market it and you communicate it is actually through things that appeal to the heartstrings, that really kind of tug at you in terms of the emotion. And of course, that's going to be a much more successful barrier to future entrants in this category than if it were just purely a play based on technology, because then when the next player comes in with a better technology, the point of comparison may be eroded, but it's probably going to be difficult to come up with a better messaging than, you know, anyone who has a body as an athlete. I think that's what's really key here.